President, good afternoon. I rise this afternoon to speak in support of the historic legislation that we are considering today, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. A little over a week ago, when I heard the news that there was an agreement reached to move forward on this legislation, I could not help but feel an overwhelming sense of relief and of joy. And I am not alone in feeling that way. I felt relief in knowing that after months of negotiations and years of hard work from volunteers, from activists, from policy experts, from leaders at all levels of government and industry, and so many others, we'd finally broken the logjam on major climate and clean energy legislation. I felt joy in knowing that we are one step closer to delivering a major victory for the American people, one that will help reduce inflation and create good-paying jobs at the same time. My belief is that this legislation is an answer to our prayers for a brighter future for our nation and for our planet. And I might say a lot of these young people that are sitting up here, we have a bunch of our pages that are here from all over the country. They are, for the most part, rising juniors and seniors. And they remind me a lot of our grandchildren, frankly, in my family. And for folks, a lot of their children. And this is for you. This is for your generation. This is for our kids, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews. This is for you. After enduring a deadly global pandemic for the last 2 years and resulting the political and economic turbulence flowing from it, the truth is that far too many Americans are struggling. They're hurting from the high cost of health care. They are hurting from rising living expenses and energy bills. And they are hurting from extreme weather that's costing us in terms of dollars and of lives. I know this because that's what I hear when I travel home to Delaware almost every night. I don't live here, I live in Delaware. Go back and forth on the train. It's just a lot like a guy named Biden used to do when he was a mere senator. And now, along with Senator Chris Coons and Lisa Blunt Rochester, our congresswoman. But whether it's a senior on a fixed income who's struggling with the cost of life-saving prescription drugs, or the young person living in a community that's prone to flooding from rising sea levels, many Delawareans of all ages are anxious about their future. And they are pleading with us to do something about it. Scientists are also pleading with us for action too, before it's too late. For years, they've warned us that time is running out, that we must shift away from fossil fuels to avoid a future of unrelenting extreme weather. And now scientists are telling us it's code red for humanity and for our planet. We're already experiencing a climate crisis, and Americans from communities large and small are feeling its impact, most notably in the form of extreme heat, wildfires, and floods. As I speak here today, nearly 100 million Americans from Texas to Maine are under heat advisories. 100 million. There are also more than 50 wildfires raging across the West, burning tens of thousands of acres in states like California and Montana and Idaho and Alaska. And just last week, catastrophic flash floods in eastern Kentucky, not far from where my mom spent the last years of her life. Those floods had tragically claimed some 37 lives. We know that these deadly extreme weather events will only get worse in the years ahead without coordinated action, And we know that the most vulnerable among us, including many communities of color, will suffer the most if we fail to act. The best science available tells us that to avoid the worst impacts of global warming, we must achieve something that's referred to as net zero carbon emissions no later than the year 2050. Achieving this ambitious goal will not be easy, but it is achievable. And I am by nature, as some of my colleagues will tell you, I am by nature an optimist. I always have been. And out of great adversity comes great opportunity. Those are the words of Albert Einstein. In adversity lies opportunity. Huge adversity here, also great opportunity. And I am proud to say that we're on the precipice of passing legislation that will channel American ingenuity to address this crisis, lower costs for families, and fight inflation. Now, how will it do all that? The Inflation Reduction Act includes nearly $370 billion in funding for climate and clean energy provisions. In other words, it will be the most ambitious climate legislation to ever emerge from this body. And it does so by not raising taxes on people whose income is under $400,000, families under $400,000. And it does so in a way that is not inflationary and that is fully paid for and offset. What will the impact be of this transformational climate legislation? Well, according to analysis from Energy Innovation, some of the smartest people here in this country who work on issues like this, according to their analysis, passing this legislation will reduce net greenhouse gas emissions by a little bit over 40% by 2030. And as President Biden might say, that's a very big deal. He might say it differently, but something along those lines. This legislation, along with action from executive agencies and state and local actors, will put us within reach of our meeting of our national target of cutting emissions in half by the end of this decade. In addition to slashing emissions from across our economy, this legislation will also unleash the potential of American clean energy industry and create good-paying jobs throughout our country. In fact, it will create a ton of jobs. Analysis from the Political Economy Research Institute at the University of Massachusetts Amherst projects that the Inflation Reduction Act, this legislation that we're debating, will help create 9 million jobs over the next decade. 9 million over the next decade. And the benefits of this historic package aren't just limited to emission reductions and to job creation. As its name suggests, this legislation will fight inflation and lower costs for many Americans. Again, ask how. For starters, the Inflation Reduction Act will help homeowners save up to $220 a year on electricity costs, according to analysis by the Resources for the Future. This legislation also includes huge health care savings for families across our country. For example, on average, median income families in Delaware with exchange-based care will save upwards of $1,000 annually. That's $101,000 back in their pockets. This bill will also ensure that our seniors don't face financial ruin paying for life-saving prescription drugs. It does so in part by capping patients' out-of-pocket costs in the Medicare Part D program at $2,000 per year. And the Inflation Reduction Act will help strengthen our tax system to better ensure that everyone pays their fair share. And also to ensure that we got decent constituent services for our constituents in our state. I don't care whether it's Minnesota, I don't care if it's Delaware or some other place. The IRS just hasn't had the resources, the people, the technology to actually provide good constituent service. We're still waiting for people to get their returns from last year and their refunds from last year. That's just totally unacceptable. And over the last probably 30, 40 years, we all reduced by roughly a quarter the amount of resources that are available to actually serve people through the IRS. At the end of the day, the programs in this bill will help create jobs, lower costs for many American families, and fight inflation, all while addressing the imminent threat of climate change and doing so in a way that leaves no community behind. It's proof that we can do well and do good at the same time. As chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, I'm especially proud that our $41 billion title within the purview of our committee prioritizes climate action in low-income and disadvantaged communities. This is part of ensuring that all communities, especially those most susceptible to the negative impacts of climate change, benefit from our funding to reduce greenhouse gas gas emissions and reduce air pollution where they live, where they live. As part of that commitment, we provide $27 billion from the Environmental Protection Agency to create a greenhouse gas reduction fund. It's known as the Green Bank, and it will help leverage private investments in projects that combat climate change, with over 40% of these investments going to underserved communities. The climate impact of this program will be huge, removing the equivalent of some 15 million gasoline-powered vehicles from our roads over the next decade. We also provide $3 billion in competitive grants to states, tribes, and municipalities, and to community-based nonprofit organizations for financial and technical assistance to address clean air and to eliminate pollution in environmental justice communities. Our EPW title also provides some $3 billion to help reduce carbon emissions flowing from our nation's ports. Doing so not only cleans up the air in nearby communities, but also reduces our reliance on foreign fuels. And we provide $1 billion to replace dirty, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles with zero-emitting vehicles on our roads, reducing fuel consumption while allowing businesses that run those trucks to save significantly on their energy costs. And while I wish I could discuss this afternoon every program in our title of the Environment and Public Works Committee, let me just close by sharing a few words on one program I'm particularly proud of, our first ever methane emission reduction program to rein in excess methane pollution from the oil and gas industry. Why did we create a program to reduce methane emissions? Why was this so important? Well, let me tell you this. Methane is more than 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. I'll say that again. Methane is more than 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. There's a guy who used to be a bank robber, Madam President, named Willie Sutton, back in the Great Depression. My friend from Iowa probably remembers Willie Sutton, not personally, but Willie Sutton robbed a lot of banks back in those days, and he finally got caught, brought to trial, and standing before the judge, and the judge said, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? Willie Sutton responded famously, that's where the money is, Judge. That's where the money is. Well, there's huge emissions that flow from methane, and they ought to be captured. They can be captured, and the program that we offer here, the funding we offer here, will help that to happen. We designed this common sense program to provide $1.5 billion to help businesses invest in existing technology to reduce potent methane emissions. It then ramps up a fee over time for emitters that fail to take advantage of this assistance. All total, we expect this program to raise about $6.5 billion, that's billions with a B, to offset the cost of other climate and environmental justice investments in the title of our committee's bill. Years from now, folks are going to gather here in this chamber, and they'll look back at what we had before us, what we were confronted with, and whether or not we made a difference. I hope they will judge us favorably. Let me just say in closing, Madam President, 2 weeks ago in England, they reported in London, England, temperature of 105 degrees. For those of us who've been to England, you may know this, they don't even have air conditioning in most places in England. The temperature there, 105 degrees. And the same week that the temperature is 105 degrees, folks are trying to run a bicycle event, the French bicycle event that's so famous. And they could not run parts of it because the pavement was melting. And they had to put tens of thousands of gallons of water on the road just so they could run the French bicycle race. Down in Louisiana, I'll close with this, in Louisiana, they have problems, they have challenges from sea level rise. And how serious are they? Well, every 100 minutes in Louisiana, they lose a piece of land to the ocean from sea level rise. Every 100 minutes, they lose a piece of land the size or football field. And today, this week, we're seeing incredible heat, incredible drought. From the West Coast to the East Coast, people suffering in some cases injury and death. And we got to do something about it. And we're going to do that with this legislation. And also make sure that a lot of folks who need jobs in the years to come will have a good paying job. That's not a bad day's work. And with that, I'm pleased to take this piece of paper and read it to my colleagues, including the senator from Iowa who's waiting patiently for me to stop talking. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that there be a period of morning business for debate only until 4:15 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, and that Senator Schumer be recognized at 4:15 p.m.
Without objection.
Madam President.
I thank the senator from Iowa for his patience today. Thank you so much.